18 and 19 is two of the better verses here in this particular chapter. Remember, at this point in time, Yahweh had already told Moshe to take the people and tell them to go out and cleanse themselves and wash themselves and separate the men from the wives, wash their clothes and everything and purify themselves. And then on the third day, they were to come out. They were still following the instructions of Moses, okay? So Moses was telling them what to do, and then they were going to come out on the third day, but there was some sound that they were going to hear that was the signal for them to come. In verse 18 it says, "Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke, because Yahweh descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly." You have to recognize how great a sound this was. And from out of this smoke and fire was going to come the voice of Yahweh. And he spoke to him, and then of course when we get into Exodus chapter 20, we know he's given them the 10 words, what they call the 10 commandments today. But go back up and look at verse 16. "Then it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunderings and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain, and the sound of the shofar was very loud, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled." Now, one thing I'd like for all of you to think about, those of you that were blowing the shofar, and some of you were trying, and some of you are learning tonight and so forth, when you pick up a shofar and you start blowing it, okay? After you've done your very best, when you start running out of wind, what happens to the sound? It kind of goes down, don't it? Okay? But then go down and look there in verse 19. "And when the blast of the shofar sounded long and became louder and louder," this Yahweh blowing the shofar. Okay? Because in a normal human being, it don't work that way, does it? Y'all ever thought about that? It got louder and louder and louder. Because his breath is forever, okay? "Moshe spoke, and El answered him by voice. Then Yahweh came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mountain, and Yahweh called Moshe to the top of the mountain, and Moshe went up." We've studied all that before, but I want you to recognize there, this is the first time since Yahweh led the people out of Egypt, and he's fixing to give them the covenant, which is what he promised to Abraham anyway. But before he gave them this, he said, "You go back and sanctify them, purify, and set yourself apart, and then you're going to come out to me on the third day." Is there any symbolism there? All kinds of things, right? In a Jewish wedding or a Hebrew wedding, once the young man is chosen a bride, what's one of the first things he goes and does? He gives her a ketubah, a marriage contract. That's what we have in what we call in the Bible is our ketubah. It's our marriage contract. And it's Yahweh explaining the promises, what he promises to do for us if we will accomplish the things that he tells us he wants us to do in that relationship. So he promises to us, and he tells us how we have to live in order to get what he promised. It's really very simple. So you might say that this point in time here was a betrothal. And this was the beginning, the first blowing of the shofar. Go back to Leviticus 23 and let's read that again. Leviticus 23 and verse 24, he says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the 1st of the month, you shall have a Shabbaton, a memorial of blowing of shofars." A memorial, a remembrance. Zikaron. Remember, one of the days, or one of the names of the day of Yom Teruah is called Yom HaZikaron, a day of remembrance. Okay? So it's a remembrance of blowing of shofar. We blow the shofar, okay, also as a aid in remembering the blowing of the shofar. So what are we remembering? Between the time in Exodus 19 and what we have here in Leviticus 23, what do we have where we can remember where the shofar blowed long and loud? Okay? There is none. But we do go back to the Exodus 19, and that was on the day of Shabbat when that occurred, when you count back when they came out.